When I came out of college, like you, I was in credit card debt. I had $12,000 in credit card debt. I remember opening up my bills and having the room spin and thinking, I'm never getting out of credit card debt. How am I going to buy a house? But I did. And in fact, I didn't buy a home when I was young by myself. I bought a home with a best friend. So how did I get my first house? First house we bought was $250,000. We put 10% down, and my best friend and I, Andrew, we split that down payment. So we each put $12,500 down. This is how we scraped it together. The house was a complete fixer-upper, and we didn't have enough money to make the mortgage payments, so we rented out bedrooms. And we had friends rent bedrooms, and that helped us cover our mortgage. We scraped it together, and that's what a lot of people do when you're young. But if you don't get in the game of homeownership, and you rent in your 20s and you rent in your 30s, you're going to turn around in your 40s and having not been built any net worth. When I wrote The Automatic Millionaire 20 years ago, two things have happened since then. The stock market has gone up in 20 years, 600%. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you had $100,000, just that has gone to $600,000. If you bought a house, the house has gone up 400%. So when you read this book with all these, there's a whole chapter of updated success stories. There are a lot of ordinary people that started saving $5, $10, $15, $20 a day, bought a starter house, and today they're millionaires.
So am I not better off renting and investing in the stock market versus buying a house? Because obviously when I buy a house, I'm paying a premium on the house so that I can get a mortgage.
I want to bust this myth, because what happens is people come on and they go, look, I can tell you right now, the stock market over the last 20 years has averaged over 10% annually. People go, the returns are better in the stock market than in real estate. Yeah, but that's not apples to apple comparison. Why? When you buy a piece of real estate, when you buy a home, people don't typically pay cash for their first house. They put down 20% and they borrow the other 80%. So you take like an example of take a $200,000 home. $200,000 home, you put 40 grand in. Home goes from 200,000 to 400,000 in 10 years. This has happened to so many people in the last 5 years. Since COVID, there are markets all over the US where housing prices have gone up 100 to 200%. So a person buys a $200,000 home, they borrowed 80%, it's doubled. So they've made 200,000 in profit. They didn't put in 200,000, they put in 40. So they got a 5 times return on their down payment. They go to sell their house, they don't pay taxes on the gain. Because when you own a home, at least in the United States, you own a home for over 2 years, if you're single, you get $250,000 in tax-free gains. If you're married, you get over $500,000 in tax-free gains. You get tax deductions on the mortgages. So what happens is people come here and they go, you know what? You shouldn't be tied down. You need to be flexible when you're young. You don't want to have the responsibility. And you should take the extra money and you should put it in a mutual fund. And you know what happens in the real world, Stephen? People don't do that. They rent an apartment that's nicer than what they can afford, and they spend all their money. And then they turn around in their mid-30s and they have no equity because they haven't bought anything, and they also haven't saved money. It is an absolute freaking myth that people take this extra money that they could have used to buy a house and they're going to put it in the stock market. They don't do that. And that's why also, by the way, corporate America got into the game of buying up real estate all over America, houses, and building apartments to rent to an entire generation, hoping these people never buy. This, like 10 days ago, Trump came out and basically said he wants the institutions out of buying up all the homes in America. Why does he want to do that? Because he recognizes how serious of a problem it is to have a generation of Americans who are renters. I'm telling you, when you look at average Americans, I'm talking about ordinary Americans, when you look at where their wealth is, it's in home equity and it's in the stock market. And this is the last thing I'll say. Generational wealth is created, for better or worse, through home equity. So when you look at what, you asked the question about causation. If a family doesn't buy a home, the likelihood the next generation can buy a home is very low, because when someone dies, the money that is in the house, that home equity, is often what transfers to the next generation and helps the next generation buy a house.
I was looking at some stats here because I wish I could sit down all of the guests that have been on my show that have had a difference of opinion and have said that buying a house is a bad investment.
It could be a really interesting conversation, right?
It would be a really interesting conversation. What I've done as an alternative to that approach is I've pulled up what they've said, and I'm going to give you some of the things they've said just so you can rebuttal them and have your say on them. One of the things that they often say is that long-term real inflation-adjusted home price appreciation in the US is about 1% annually. And one of my guests cited Robert Schiller as the evidence of that. After maintenance, which usually equals 1 to 2%, property taxes, which equals about 1%, insurance and transaction costs, the net real returns approach roughly zero on average. So when you say housing is a great investment, are you referencing the gross appreciation, which is the total appreciation, or the net returns after taxes, maintenance, insurance, and selling costs?
So when you dig into these kind of numbers like this, what they are is they're numbers, but they're not real world. Right. So like when you talk to someone who owns a home today and they've owned it for 20 years, and you ask them, how much of your net worth is now in the equity in your house? Over 50% of their net worth is in their house. You will see people on your YouTube channel that literally, if you read the comments, and I'm sure you do.
I do, yeah.
Where people say, it's not true. I read a comment yesterday on your YouTube page. All I know is I bought a house and it's gone up in value 3.5 times. And the rent when I bought the house was $1,200. And the rent today to buy that, if I had that house, if I was renting it, would be $4,000. So the thing is you have to understand is that rents always go up, Stephen. Like I lived in New York City for 18 years. When I moved to New York City in 2001, a really nice apartment was like $6,000 a month.